So welcome to the BCE, and Karen's our wonderful host for today. So she'll keep track of our chat box for those of you who are new, and a place for you to put any of your questions or comments. All of these sessions are built around a guided practice, and we've made some adjustments for this next round just to explore some new aspects of the process. But the primary purpose for these sessions is really just to give you a lived experience of how we work and what we do, and allow you to go on a journey that feels important and useful for you today. All right. So just gonna, and I want to just welcome those of you who are coming for the first time, and if there's anything that any of you are bringing to us today, or anything you want to check in with, you might want to just say hello in the chat box, just so we know who's here, and particularly if you're new, what brought you here today? And we'll give you a minute to do that if that interests you, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hmm. Hey, Christopher. Put up the slides while you're, there we go. Hmm. 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 Wonderful. All right. Feel free to keep. We have a strong contingent from the Eastern U.S. Hmm. Interesting. All right. Well, let's go ahead and I really enjoyed this photo. Just we'll use this as sort of an anchor for our session today. And as many of you know, the theme for this entire year has been trust. And we began way back when looking at trusting ourselves, which is not always easy. Um, and now we're going to sort of expand all the way to the other end of the spectrum, if you will, in some ways, and explore our capacity to trust life. Um, and so we're today with the first of our sort of four-part series on this. We're going to look at the flow itself. We're going to use the river as our metaphor, and we're going to focus each of our four quarters on one aspects of actually of the photo. The questions for today really are, where are you on the river, and what do you need right now? And those questions will become clear when we introduce the activity, but I just want to give you a sense of orientation about using river as a metaphor for life. So, yeah, so for those of you who'd like to know where you're going, these are the next 4 months of our time together. We're going to use the four primary phases of our narrative coaching model, which map nicely to this process that we're about to experience. And these are the sort of the four lettings, if you will, one for each of the months. And today we're going to focus on trusting the river of life. Next month, we'll look at trusting the current, because sometimes the river does all kinds of things, some of which we anticipate and some of which we don't. We're going to, in the third month, look at trusting the light, excuse me, in terms of ourself and the candle. And then lastly, we're going to focus in November on trusting the sea, because every river eventually finds its way to the sea. And so we're going to just spend some time looking at what that might mean for us in terms of how we live our life and do our practices. Um, and this is a slide that we've carried forward through the whole year. And it uses one of our core tenets of our new work, which is inviting you to think about using this moment, whatever moment you're in, as your curriculum. And so the way that this works for the program is we're actually not going to teach you anything. We're going to do some things that might invite you to learn something, but and we're going to invite you to sort of hold at the same time an intention, because there's an activity we're about to do for which having an intention gives us a bit of focus. All the while, we recognize the other half of that equation, which is that the space we're intending to be in the process is a space of mystery. And so a lot of what we're doing is holding both of those at the same time in the moment and saying, what am I being asked to pay attention to? What am I being asked to notice? What am I being asked to learn? And so we're going to imagine ourselves, if you've ever done yoga and you try to do these kind of poses and you think about them, you fall over. And so part of it is learning how to sort of move from the center of ourself, move from our breath. And we're going to invite you to think about that as an analogy for how you might experience today and learn from today. And And so the image that we're going to use today is going back to this notion of us floating as a candle on a little pedestal, if you're a little float, down the river. And so our fundamental practice is going to be today looking at, can we trust the river and whatever that means to us. And I recognize in saying this that people have varying levels of comfort and affinity and experience in water. Um, and so I want you to imagine today that if water creates any anxiety for you, which it does for some people, just to summon up whatever resources you need in yourself to imagine yourself feeling supported. Um, and so that you can get the most out of the experience. Um, when one of the sort of inspirations for this whole metaphor, it has long-standing practices in many traditions, but comes from a book by Richard Bach from way back when. And I want to just invite you for a minute just to close your eyes and let me read this to you. This next slide will be in every one of our sessions the next 4 months, but this will be the only time I read it. And otherwise, we're going to make the recording available online. But all right. So if you wouldn't mind just closing your eyes, make it easier for you to hear and not be distracted. And it goes like this. Once there was a village of creatures that lived along the bottom of a great crystal river. The current of the river swept silently over them all, young and old, rich and poor, good and evil. The current going its own way, knowing only its own crystal self. Each creature in its own manner clung tightly to the twigs and rocks on the river bottom, for clinging was their way of life, and resisting the current was what each had learned from birth. But one creature said at last, I am tired of clinging. Though I cannot see it with my eyes, I trust that the current knows where it is going. I shall let it go and let it take me where it will. Clinging, I shall die of boredom. The other creatures laughed and said, Fool, let go, and that current you worship will throw you tumbled and smashed across the rocks, and you will die quicker than boredom. But the one heeded them not, and taking a breath did let go, and at once was indeed tumbled and smashed by the current across the rocks. And yet, in time, as the creature refused to cling again, the current lifted him from the bottom, and he was bruised and hurt no more. And the creatures downstream, to whom he was a stranger, cried, See, a miracle, a creature like ourselves, and yet it flies. See the Messiah come to save us all. And the one carried in the current said, I am no more Messiah than you. The river delights to lift us free, if only we dare let go. So as we prepare for our practice, I just want to invite you to just take a moment of quiet and just reflect on anything that was sparked for you in that brief parable. And if you want to put anything in the chat box, please do. Or if you want to speak to that, just put your hand up and Karen will find you. And then we'll move into our practice for today with a focus on following the flow like the river to the sea. Now I'm just going to see if anybody wants to share anything. Hmm. Okay.
It brought to mind the notation I saw about a tech person, and I don't know their name. He became the vice president of Apple along with Steve Jobs'
Mhm.
presence. And he lost a job. And that day he walked into a restaurant, and that is where he met Steve Jobs.
Okay.
And it changed the trajectory of his whole life.
Hmm.
And sometimes being in the flow, or letting the river carry you, is not something you can set up.
Mhm.
It's sometimes it's who knows what happens behind the scenes, so to speak, in the ether world. But on the 3D level, we have connections, or have the river sometimes come and get us.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
um,
yeah. Maybe the river is the Uber of our soul
yes.
comes to pick us up. Anything, Karen, you want to bring forward from the chat box? And then we'll move into our practice.
Well, David just thought about the idea of resisting versus letting go. I don't know, David, is there something you wanted to ponder on that?
No, I can sense that resistance was holding on and going against the flow. And
Yeah,
sometimes it's good to go with the flow.
yeah. Hmm.
Mhm. And Stephanie's noting surrendering to what is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Hmm. The story that I've often told in classes is when I used to take high school kids canoeing, and particularly some of the boys, but not always. Um, uh, it was always entertaining to watch them try to effort their way and muscle their way down the river as if they had any capacity to thwart the river's intention. And they learned a lot about the laws of physics pretty quickly when they realized that the river often had designs on them that they were not so excited about because they wanted to take them to places where the river was going, but they wanted to go somewhere else. And so they learned the art of surrendering to the river and using it as leverage to move your boat downstream, but to not try to fight the river. And so I think as I get older, I think more and more I just realize how much of my own issues are just the fatigue from trying too hard to change the river.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And Candida asks, how can you find it within yourself to let go?
Yeah. 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 And so for me, to that point, what I wanted to start with is that if we don't have a fundamental trust in life, which is sometimes challenged by traumas, by issues, by other people, by our own regrets and perceptions of mistake, then we lose the capacity to sort of feel into what the river is offering, what life's making available. We often try to contort ourselves or to contort the flow to be a certain way. If you, yeah, and so the purpose of the practice, which some of you have been doing with me for a while now, is really to help us find ways to let go of some of that so that we can actually have more agency and autonomy in what we're choosing to do. So let me see if I can get this to work. Excellent. So here's the entire model, but we're only going to focus on the first one for today. So I'm not going to try to explain all of it, but in essence, we were, from our narrative release work, we were looking at sort of using our in and out breath as a way to kind of modulate our experience of ourself, our experience of what's going on. There's a series of releases with that breath, which allow us to begin to pause and relax and open up into whatever's becoming available to us. This often requires us to leave certain things behind and compost it so that we can become more mature as a human being and carry on much lighter than when we began. And so what we'll do over the next 4 months is we will focus on one of these 4 main sort of stages of the model. And each time we come to a month, we'll do a little bit warm up to kind of get us ready for the section we want to focus on that month. But for now, what I'd like you to do is I'm just going to guide you through a very quick meditation around this, and we're going to focus on just this first level of trust. And so, in this time that we live in, it's often challenging to feel trusting, and life seems a bit wacky at the moment, to say the least. And we're, especially because we have to earn a living, we often worry about things like branding and messaging and places like LinkedIn and how we seem and how we sell and all these things which have to do with our presentation in the world. But this one is really around, do we have a fundamental, or how is our fundamental, almost existential trust in life? And part of it is recognizing that moving with resilience and through these kind of times requires some discretionary energy. And so if our energy is filled with either recovering from the river or trying to alter the river or wishing the river were different or something, we don't have the energy we need. We're clinging on like the creatures at the bottom. We're clinging on because we somehow don't really trust the river. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. It might seem a bit big for some, that's fine. Because part of this is we're not going to guide you to a specific destination. We're going to invite you to an experience and allow you to just discover, what do I notice today in this next period of time about my willingness to let go and my willingness to trust the river of my life, or the river of life with capital L. And so if it helps you, I'd like just to invite you to, again, close your eyes. We'll just do this for about 10 minutes, and then we'll put you into some pretty extensive breakout rooms for you to share some conversation with some colleagues. But for now, if you wouldn't mind just closing your eyes again. And I always like to start with wiggling my toes so I make sure I'm grounded on the floor as the foundation for this process, not my head. And as you kind of just draw your attention all the way up your legs and into your pelvis, just allow yourself to settle into your chair and feel maybe your low back against the back of a chair if you have one. Allow yourself to just be here. You might allow yourself to just relax your breathing, let it do its job. As you move to a quieter, stiller place, I would like you to imagine yourself lying on your back in water, in a river that's magically salty and allows you to stay afloat with absolutely no effort. You're in a spot in the river right now where you're in an eddy. There's no current really. It's not trying to take you anywhere. It's just inviting you to be here now and float. As you're floating, I want you to notice how you have arrived today. If there's anything specific that you brought to the session or that is on your mind or your heart today that feels important to you, just give it some attention. And as you focus on your breathing out, just notice how breathing out allows you maybe to feel your back and imagine it being held as if by the softest of hands by the river. And just keep breathing out and allowing yourself to relax. Knowing at some point the river might bring you back out into the current again, but for now, you're just here. As you allow yourself to float, is there anything that you notice you're being asked to let go of that would enable you to be here even more or to be present with whatever came to your mind? In whatever ways we struggle to, or don't trust life fully enough, it's like tying rocks to ourselves and then wondering why we're having a hard time floating. So imagine that anything that's come up that is in the way or impeding your ability to trust the river, you can just notice it with great compassion. And perhaps imagine yourself untying the string. So the rock that was once weighing you down now falls to the bottom of the river. It's been composted, returned back to its source. How does the river feel to you now? As you sit with your trust in the river, is there something in you that now feels lighter, perhaps even more mature? And if for some reason the rocks didn't really want to be untied and let go, just notice what that's about. Maybe pay attention to the knot in the string. What keeps you holding on? However you are in this place right now with the river is just fine. As you prepare to come back into the room, just sort of notice again anything else in your body, in your heart, in your mind that feels maybe perhaps different now. Maybe your exhales seem deeper, maybe more relaxed. What would increasing your trust in the river make possible for you? So when you're ready, I'm going to invite you just to open your eyes and come back to the room. And before we feel like we need to be in a group again, I just want to invite you to take a minute or two if you want to put any notes down for yourself about anything that felt important to you. You can put it in the chat if you'd like. You can put it on your own notepad, whatever works for you, just to kind of harvest whatever emerged for you from this practice. There we go. Mm. Mm. All right. Anybody want to share anything before we move into some small groups?
Thank you, Christopher, for what you shared.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-mm. All right. So, Karen, if we could put them into groups of 3, please,
Okay.
and we can give them, let's just say 40 minutes.
40 minutes. And we understand that sometimes people have to hop up before the breakout. Does anybody need to go? And that's just fine.
Yeah.
Let us know now.
I just need to go at the end of the 40 minutes.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, well, we're glad we'll have you then.
And for those, and here's some questions that you might consider for your group. They're just options that you might discover that your conversation takes a different road. That's fine too. But if you want some questions to kind of prompt the start of your discussion, here's 3 you can choose from. And Karen, if you could just put those in the chat box, that would be fabulous.
They are. Got it.
Excellent. You're on top of it. Excellent.
It's a rare moment.
I know. All right. Well, enjoy your breakout groups, and we'll see you when you get back on the other side.
Okay. Off we go.
Hmm. Hmm. There we go. So, I'm just really curious what the river had to say to you in your breakout rooms. Perry.
Here you go.
I loved one of the things that somebody in our group said was that he didn't know the river was there. And now that he does, he's going to explore it more.
Okay.
So I really appreciated that. And yeah, I think we took a lot away from the envisioning of that physical experience of the river, David. And that's certainly something that I think will stick with me in terms of a practice.
Mhm. Thanks. Who else would like to share something? Oh,
I
okay. Yeah.
I realized starting in the first few minutes that I am not trusting the river much right now.
Very true.
So that was kind of a global realization. So I need to felt like really reflecting on trusting the river would be a really good practice for me.
Hi, David.
Hey, Brenda.
I agree with MJ. It's MJ, right?
Yes.
I think sometimes we have so much in our heads and the river is beckoning us, but we just can't let go because of what we're telling ourselves. You know, we are holding on to those bits of us that we really don't want to let go. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Magdalene.
This is my first time in one of your groups, and I had no idea what I was walking into. And so we talked a lot in our group. We talked a lot about expectations, expectations of the river. I came into it with my academic head on, and I get stuck in the metaphor. I don't like rivers. I don't go into rivers. I like the ocean. I have no problem laying back, but the idea of being in a stagnant pool of water anywhere. And so I found myself very anxious. And when I realized as you run through the meditation, was that my anxiety really came up. I found myself very anxious, very fearful. I felt the tightness and then all of a sudden these tears came and I was annoyed because I didn't expect that. Because I came in with a different expectation.
Sure.
And so we talked a lot about like what happens when you're working with other people. I'm an educator. I'm not a formal coach yet. But the other participants are, and we talked a lot about when you're working with other people, how they sometimes become the river for you. And you have to be able to let yourself and your ego and your expectations and your own story go in order to be present for them in a moment. So it was for me very profound. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and I can imagine if you envisioned it as a stagnant pool of water, it wouldn't be very inviting at all. Yeah, and yeah. So again, that's why I preface this by we all have our histories and relationships with water. So find one that works for you. Anybody else feel inclined to share what came up for you in your group? Yeah, Michelle.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I loved it. Even though I had my eyes closed, I had my eyes open. All I could see was beautiful green and beautiful blue, and just laying in that water. There was a strange piece because I was trying to find the rock, and I realized, and I drew a picture and I shared it with the group, that my head was the rock, and I was laying buoyant, and I didn't even know I was under the water. So as soon as those words were, let go, it actually took a while for the rock to start to break down. And I realized the rock was everything outside of me. And so once I just started to focus on me and then started cleansing myself with water, I just felt myself then relax. So thank you very, very much, because I needed this in this moment. And David, I can't swim. I had a bad relationship with water all my life, and now I love water. So this was exactly what I needed right now. So thank you very much.
Fabulous. Candida.
We had a beautiful conversation. So, and thank you very much for giving us those images. So I was literally, at first I couldn't place myself where I was in the river, and then I realized, oh my God, I'm like all those people. I'm just clinging on to like weeping willows. It's all messy, and I just was hanging in there. And I think that's where my question came from. So how can you find it within yourself to just let go? And the image that then emerged whilst Sylvia and I were talking was something like, you know, a train, you have a switch on a train, and that I think thinking it through like that, sometimes you can just go into that idea of possibility of what if you just actually switched track and looked at it from a different angle, or moved, or went across. So actually in our conversation, there were loads of those switches that came up where we thought like, okay, you could do it this way, but you can also do this. You know, you can also, because it's all in it's story, you tell yourself a story. You could play with rewriting that and see what happens. So that's what kind of came up for us.
Thanks. I was reading a couple of things yesterday in a book about one of their hypotheses was that many of the things that go on to become strengths in our life are actually start out as compensations and adjustments we make for gaps we're experiencing in our family system. And I was thinking about that in a humorous way. So I'm getting ready to move to Europe, and I spent 7 weeks there, and I just got back last week. But on the last day, of course, my partner and I were running around trying to get everything ready for me to take off, and we noticed this sort of, and we both started laughing, that there was points of not trusting the river, but it was exhibited in completely opposite directions. So when she gets in that state, she becomes hyperactive and wants to do 1,000 things. Then when I do that, when I experience that same sort of scarcity or not fully trusting everything's going to be, then I move to quiet and distance. So of course you can imagine that each of our coping strategies completely alienated and pissed off the other person because we were doing the exact opposite of what they wanted us to be doing. And so we finally had sort of created a third space for that. But you can see the ways in which all of our moments, we were born in, if I assume all went well in the womb, in a floating state, right? So this is our natural state of rest and our natural state of care, and there's things that come along in life that are sometimes jarring and challenging. So it's not that the river is always beautiful and calm and peaceful. It just means it is the river. It is life. It's all of life that's holding us. And so part of the value for this whole piece around this first letting go is, can we just be with what the river is at that moment in time, as opposed to wishing it were different, or remembering it as it once was, or worrying about what it might be coming later. And there's times in that where we actually need to actually move out of the river, because I remember in my old days when I used to do a lot of rafting with my best friend, there were certain rabbits that were, because every day was different, we'd have to park the boat, go up on a rock, look at what the water was doing that day, and then make our course of plan accordingly. And so there's times when sort of noticing ourselves and how we are in relationship to the river can actually be quite helpful to us to see what we might need to do in terms of making any adjustments. Is there anything else that feels important for anybody from your group for right now that hasn't had a chance to share yet?
And I'm just going to say there's a request to share the title of the book that was mentioned.
Oh, I was afraid you'd ask that. I'll have to look.
Sorry.
I was just importing notes from it for my next book. I'll look and yeah, maybe I'll put it in. There's a little forum for the BCE. Or if you ask me next time, I can tell you. Christopher.
Yeah, so one thing that came up for me is exploring the metaphor itself. And I realized that I had this implicit assumption that I was floating with my face outward, facing the sky.
Okay.
And I thought, well, this is a metaphor. I can do whatever I want. What could happen if I was able to breathe underwater and actually turned around and discovered an entirely new world? Uh, and so this led to a conversation about the inner and the outer, and as discrete world as we often perceive it, but actually part of the river as well as we are floating. So that was quite an interesting thing for me to realize that actually there's an entirely new world exactly where I am. I just need to turn around.
Yeah, and to be curious to know which direction you think you were facing when you were floating in the river.
Yep.
Yeah. Gyre and gimbal.
It's a quote from Jabberwocky, David. Did
that's
gyre and gimbal in the wave, and I think that I spelled it right.
Okay. There
Yeah, I
you
did
go.
a little of that in my visioning, did some gyring and gimbling in the wave.
Yeah. Yeah, so my invitation for you all for the rest of the week is just to start noticing noticing how the river shows up in your life. And there's so much effort in the West on our effort and what we're doing and what we need to be doing and goals and agendas and objectives, and I find most of that exhausting now. And just so much of how we grow and how we mature has to do with our evolving relationship with our environment. And so just to kind of pay attention to, like, where am I being called to trust the river, either in a new way or more than I was before? And how would I know that in myself? I did want to just share before we close one slide, and then can close for the day. Yeah, so in October, this will be out next week. I'll get info on this, but we're launching a 6-week sort of intensive, introducing the 5 Maturities work, which some of you have come to sessions about. It takes what you've did today and takes all the things we've done in our BCE, puts them in the frame of our own maturation, and then gives you practical sort of strategies and processes by which you can develop yourself. And along these lines, and so they think about kind of where you ended up today and kind of what you discovered about yourself. This will be a taste of a much longer program next year that sort of functions more like a retreat, which will give you a chance to go on a journey for yourself to deal with things like you raised today, and learn some maybe new ways of addressing them that might help you find your way in the world with a bit more ease and authenticity. So, like I said, you'll be getting some notices in the coming days, and we'd love to have you come and join us for that if you would like. Otherwise, I just want to thank you for coming. As always, if you've got any questions, actually, if you just write, whoever was, I think it was Candida, if you ask about the book title, just send Steve a notice at this email address here. Karen, could you just scrape it into the chat box for her? And
Yes,
then
it's in there.
Great, and I'll send you the book title. But anything else for today that feels important as a way to bring closure to this conversation for you? Christopher.
Just a quick question. I didn't get that quickly, but when are you going to announce this new program, and when could I register?
If I remember correctly, all that stuff opens up on Monday. I think there's some more, a couple of emails going out at the end of this week, but I believe the registration opens on Monday. Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for your participation and presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything.
And we hope you come and join us in September.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Karen.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
y'all.